You're listening to the Travis Makes Money podcast presented by GoHighLevel.com. For a free 30-day trial of the best all-in-one digital marketing software tool on the planet, just go to GoHighLevel.com/Travis. What's going on, money makers? Welcome back to the Travis Makes Money podcast, where it's our mission to help you make some more money. Today on the show, we're going to be talking a little bit about coffee and the coffee business with my new friend, Robert Bush. Robert Bush is a senior investment executive with experience across multitude of industries and geographies, as well as asset classes. He's engaged in various financial and operating special projects for sovereign-related entities, family businesses, family offices, investment companies, corporations, and startups. Bob provides live television commentary and keynotes at global conferences on innovation, social impact, sustainability, global investing, and international trade. So this is going to be a fascinating conversation because he also had a really cool celebrity partnership with the coffee brand that they're building, which kind of goes into the relationship side of things, which I also talk about on my other podcast, Travis Makes Friends. So I'm stoked to have this conversation with Bob. But before we jump into it really quickly, if you are a 7, 8, or 9-figure entrepreneur and you want to add a podcast into your lineup this year, I'm taking a couple one-on-one podcast consulting clients for a limited time to help you get your show out into the world, to explode your network, build your personal brand, put more content on social, and even learn how to get paid to do all those things. So travischappell.com/coaching. There's a quick application. Fill that out, see if we might be a good fit to work together. That's travischappell.com/coaching. Now, without further ado, Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Travis, for having me.
Yes, sir. Of course. Well, let's start with a softball question here. How do you currently make money?
Great. We focus on value. We focus on creating value. And we think the more you can create value, it is highly correlative to making money. If you create something that a lot of people want, if you can deliver it, you can deliver on your promise consistently, and you should be able to monetize that to make money. So the project that we are currently working on is to make money so that the more money we make, we can create more social impact because we're a social enterprise. And as a social enterprise, we're constantly looking to blend making money in the right way by doing well and by doing good.
What were you doing at the beginning of your career, Bob, to put you up to set you up for success now?
Well, I'll tell you the first thing I did, it wasn't career, but the first project I came up with to make myself some money, I was 14 years old. And this was in the early 80s. Hip hop had just come out. And I went to this boys' school, one of the only brothers in the class. And all my friends were like, Bob, they're coming to me. I'm like, I don't know what they're saying either. so I took the time, I bought the album. It was Rapper's Delight. And I listened to it like 50 times. And I wrote down all the lyrics. I gave it to my mom. She typed up the lyrics. She made photocopies of it. And in 48 hours, I was distributing the lyrics to Rapper's Delight to my high school class, a dollar per sheet. And I made that day 25, 30 bucks.
Nice.
In the early 80s. So that was my entrepreneurial journey, that I spotted a need. I had to put in the work. I didn't have to pay my mom anything. So, the lemonade stand where the kid really thinks they're in business, but then guess what? They're not paying the rent. They didn't buy the lemons, etc. So it was a little bit of that, but it really sort of sparked how if you put a little bit of effort, you see something and you're putting a little bit of time, you can make some money. So that's not really the start of the career, but that really was that spark of, wow, executing and monetizing an idea and giving the people what they want, right? Which in this case was some 14-year-old boys.
So from that point forward, Bob, was there a constant itch for entrepreneurship? Like, were you always looking on how to make another dollar? Like, where did that take you schooling wise and things like that?
So my hustle was never about the money as the money. My hustle was always about solving a problem.
The game.
So the game. I didn't really know if I was going to make 20 bucks or 25 bucks. There was a problem, a bunch of people with regards to the lyrics of the song, right? And so that mindset, I think, is the key to everybody's entrepreneur, is the identification of a problem that no one else has solved. And and that mindset set took me to, I was a philosophy major in college,
Oh,
right?
interesting.
I went to Amherst College, a small little college outside of Boston. I studied philosophy. Now, while I was studying philosophy, I assumed that I was going to become a diplomat, right? And but all my friends at the time were going to Wall Street. They were going to fancy consultancy firms. They were going to investment banks, etc. One. And two, tuitions are crazy now, but they were also crazy then. I just needed money, the
Yeah.
practical part of it. And I assumed I would go to grad school and I was going to need money. I wanted to work for a few years and then parlay that into getting a master's or a doctorate or an MBA or whatever. And so the impulse for making money was because I wanted to continue with my education. And the impulse for trying to continue with my education is I just followed, hey, what are you guys? Oh, there's a Goldman Sachs interview. So I'm like, Goldman Sachs? What's Goldman Sachs? Make a long story short, I realized there was a lot more money to be made in banking than there was in diplomacy.
Yeah.
And so I took a job doing mergers and acquisitions. And I remember applying for that job, Travis. They said, Bush, you're a good kid. I had done very well in college. I was president of my class, captain of the rugby club, all of these sorts of things, right? But I hadn't read a financial statement. And they said that, you're a good kid, you're a personable kid. We're going to put you in sales. And I said, no, you're not. They said, well, you don't know anything. We've got Wharton kids, we got all these MBAs, et cetera, that are coming into M&A. I said that I will not sleep. I'm competitive. I want to learn this. I studied philosophy because that would be the last opportunity for me to really do that. And not only that, I was like a double geek. I read philosophy in Latin and Greek. So like I was truly trying to be unemployable for the rest of my life.
Yeah, no
Right.
kidding.
Right. And I said, no. I said, listen, you're going to bring in all these kids that have studied the traditional finance and physics and stuff. Hire one guy like me, and I won't disappoint you because I can't give you their answer because I don't know what they've studied. But I bet I'll give you a thoughtful, interesting response.
Mm.
So they took me out of the sales group, put me in the M&A group, and they bust my butt. I slept in the office. I did 100 plus hours a week, but
Wow.
I'm highly competitive and I wanted to learn. I learned from bottom up. I had a couple good people to mentor me a little bit, but mainly it was sweat and we ground through it. And the first major project I was put on was RJR Nabisco, which was the largest leverage buyout in the history of Wall Street. And
Wow.
I was one of the analysts on that deal, right? And I remember saying, this deal doesn't work. They never pay down the debt, right? And Grasshopper, we know they'll never pay down the debt, right? And so, and so I learned that something called the PIC, which is payment in kind, where you recycle fresh capital to take out the old capital. And so I slowly started understanding the ways of the street and the
Mm.
ways of money and the value of money in a capital stack and how you optimize for capital efficiency and how operational efficiency gives you greater capital efficiency. And I was on my way. I love that kind of thinking. These were other kinds of problems to solve, but it was tangible because then you knew at the end of the day, if your revenue went up or your EBITDA margin went up or you cut your costs or whatever it was. And I like the specificity of being able to work with numbers and using numbers as a way to solve problems for our clients. And
Yeah.
then I was off to the races.
So along that path, Bob, were you also picking up things like on the side, or was it just there's no time, I'm 100% in on Wall Street? Like, how long did it take for you to kind of be like, hey, I think I've been doing this for so many other people for so long now and I'm really good at it. What if I just did this for myself and started my own thing? How long did that process take?
It took me 1 year. I took
One
my
year.
entire bonus and I put it into a restaurant because In the late 80s, sushi was becoming in fashion. And I met another entrepreneur who was opening up a sushi bar at right near the NYU campus.
Okay.
Lots of kids, lots of disposable income, and there was no sushi kind of within the walking distance of the school. So I took my entire bonus and invested in the sushi restaurant.
It's like
So
a
it didn't take,
startup, like you started it from scratch, or you bought something that was already there, or
they had, they were opening and they were looking for some fresh capital.
mm,
And I said, I'm in because I like sushi. I knew there was a ready market. I had had the product, and the only issue was, can you get a liquor license so you can
mm.
sell beer and sake, etc.? Yes. Soon as I got the liquor license, I knew even if kids didn't want the sushi, they were going to have the sake, they were going to have the beer, like all of that. And that was my first venture outside of my day job. Yeah, right. And so it didn't take me long because, again, it's about problem solving, finding opportunities in the market. And I didn't have a lot of money, but I did roll that into something that I knew that's working when I'm working. Right.
Yeah, right,
And I
right.
remember leaving my job on my way home at midnight or whatever, driving by, seeing that line on the sidewalk going, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We before we hit the record button, you had mentioned kind of your philosophy on personal finance during this time as well. The the issue for a lot of people, I think, Bob, is that they get so caught up in this keeping up with the Joneses mentality, especially in an area like Wall Street when you're in New York and everybody's got the latest fashion, everybody's got the latest car, everybody's got the latest, the nice apartment, and you want to impress everybody around you, and it's a status grab essentially. It can be really, really difficult to be disciplined with your finances during that time period. But a lot of people fall into that trap. And then when an opportunity like that comes up, they can't seize the opportunity because they don't have the cash, or they don't have any way to get involved in the deal that they're seeing. And then they buy into this lie that there's no opportunity anywhere. But really, it's like there's opportunity everywhere. You're just not poised to take advantage of the opportunity. So, what were you doing personal finance wise during this entire period of your life?
No, thank you for that question, right? It's so firstly, I watched my dad squeeze all the toothpaste out of the tube, right?
Mm,
That's that's that sort of implicit culture that I was in at home. We do not waste, right?
mm,
And that was somehow embedded in me. So no matter where I went and the opportunities I had, first it was about just not wasting, right? And then you get to now the whole Jones thing, right? And part of that not wasting was a bit out of necessity, quite frankly. We don't waste because it's expensive to replace.
yeah.
So, right? But then I started having more capital, yeah, that Jones, that status thing. I remember Hermes ties and Gucci loafers, right? And so guess what I did? Friends of mine were so often were rolling over and getting fresh Hermes ties. I'd buy it at 30, 40 cents on the dollar. They had resale stores and all of that. So I needed to fit in. I wanted to look. I recognized the value of that uniform, but there was no way I wanted to spend top dollar on that. So sometimes you can still play the status game and recognize it for what it's worth and not be foolish about it. So no, I didn't have 10 Hermes ties. I worked the heck out of the 3 or 4 that I had, right?
Yeah.
You got me through the week and got it back from the cleaners. You rotated those suckers. So that's what I did. That's how I sort of, at least that uniform thing, right?
Yeah.
And then when you get to these other issues around personal finance and the purpose, I quickly realized because of the company that I was keeping, because of the numbers that I was seeing with my bosses or their bosses' bosses, that, and particularly looking at these companies and really studying how companies are really no different than individuals. Those companies are run by individuals who are their marketing budgets and their advertising budgets and the offices and making sure there's art on the wall and all of that. And you start to see that that's signaling that they think they're doing, which is to show affluence and that we're a company that's of means and is worthy and trustworthy, et cetera. When you see the real numbers, you realize that half that stuff is also a facade. And so by really being the numbers guy, you could see it with individuals, you could see it in the financial models, et cetera. And I just wasn't gonna get sucked into that. I didn't buy my first car until I was in my 30s. Now it helped being in New York
Sure.
because the trains are so prevalent, the taxis are so prevalent. But I remember being in college and riding my bike around campus. Hey man, there's nothing geekier than riding your bike to pick up your girl and ask her if she's got a bike too. But you know what? She was fit because she had to ride her bike too, right? Let's do something on a Saturday, right? And so I made my weakness my strength.
Yeah.
And what I found is that my friends and those that were around me, I started to attract people that have had a similar kind of mindset or who recognize that, I'm my own person and hey, if Bob's coming, we're not gonna buy this $500 bottle of wine. We're gonna get something reasonable, right? Or hey guys, if you want to get that, I'm still gonna give you my $50, right? And so I started attracting people that were like-minded. I was staying true to myself because at the end of the day, I realized that it was always about the values, right? My parents didn't, I'm from the Midwest, man. I'm from a small town. They could have, I was making more money than my dad 2 years out of college,
Mm.
right? My dad
Yeah.
was a fireman, right? He was a firefighter, and my mother worked for the city government, right? And so those values were much more important to me than the valuations and the value that was supposedly put on this stuff. And so I really have to say it was my parents that sort of set me up to think this way.
As a parent myself, and for any parents that are listening, what are some things that we can do as a parent with our kids that will instill that type of a mindset into them rather than this, again, the status chase?
Wow, that's funny. That's tough because I carry a Android phone, right? Both my kids have iPhones. Trying to not have them have iPhones, it was just not, I didn't want to die on that hill. So I'm not sure if I'm the best to give advice to your children as parents about certain things. So okay, so you get the iPhone, and then they go, Dad, why don't you have one? And I go, because this is what came with AT&T. It was $200, and Daddy loses them, and Daddy breaks them, and so you take care of yours, but I be more responsible than me, and so we sort of talk our way into it. But I do signal it's just not that important to me, right?
Mm.
So I think as my dad did and my mom did, you mirror what you say. It's very challenging for a kid to think that he shouldn't get the highest price Jordans if
Yeah.
his mom and dad are wearing the highest price, whatever they're wearing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Bill Cosby has a funny line on this, right? My money ain't your money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So they still have to recognize that it's nice to have good things because we work for them. And what did you do? So now getting to the second point, have your kids working for stuff. Have them have chores,
Mm.
give them a budget, let them understand in their way that that candy costs something,
Yeah.
right? And so these are kind of common sense things, but as parents, we may forget how much we unintentionally signal bad habits,
Yeah.
right? And then once they leave the house, now you got the kids who's also parents are signaling bad habits, etc. So I think the third thing you got to give your kid is integrity and forthrightness and not being afraid to stand on your own business and have
Yeah.
your own perspectives. And that comes from love and confidence and conversations, right? Because of course, man, like you've worked hard, you want to play hard, you want to enjoy yourself, but you can be happy without happenings.
Mm.
We had one car in our family, but the second vehicle was a motorhome because our dad and my mom took us to places. When Jimmy Carter died, we were there. I'm sorry, when Elvis Presley died, when we were there. When Jimmy Carter became president, we're going to Plains to the peanut farmers. Where's Plains? And we got in the motorhome. So they always prioritize learning. They always
Mm.
prioritize experiences, never stuff. And
Yeah.
that's the kind of modeling. And so just staying consistent about that, be who you want your kid to be.
Yeah.
And they'll pick up the signals. And yes, they'll go a little bit astray when they go to friends and kids, but they'll never forget that, right? The Jesuits say, you show me who your kids are by the time you're 7, and I'll show you who they're going to be the rest of their lives. So
Mm.
you got to start early.
You were a philosophy major, and now basically your entire career has been in the entrepreneurial business space. Do you still find yourself pulled into philosophy these days?
Yeah, because it's really a way. Well, I studied philosophy because I just really wanted to understand how to think. I wanted to understand how to have civil discourse. I
Mm.
really wanted to understand how to approach a problem, how to dissect a problem, how to listen better. These are life skills, right? Whether it's rhetorical oration or logic and understanding how to be persuasive. And these are life skills that I didn't recognize then how directly they're related to financial skills, the
Mm.
ability to persuade through numbers, not just with words, right? The ability to make logical, coherent storytelling, right? That's part of what the liberal arts education is supposed to give you, which it gave to me. So I went from words to numbers to data, but the bedrock of that really is logical frameworks and understanding how to synthesize lots of information. So I remember a mentor saying to me, I said that because then I was trying to determine if I was going to go to business school or law school after under undergrad. And he said, Bob, it really doesn't matter because when you get to my level, you're going to be judged on your ability to give good judgment and good advice. And 30 years in this game, you're going to have to understand the legal implications of things, the geopolitical implications of things, the financial implications of things. Now, you're not going to, you can hire the lawyer, you can hire the economist, you can hire the finance guy, but at the capstone of your career, you're going to be the guy who's going to have to synthesize all of that to make good decisions or advise the person who was going to have to synthesize all of that to give them the best judgment and best advice. And I listened to that. So I went to graduate school and studied economics, and I went to law school and got a law degree. And over the course of my career, I've had the opportunity to advise family offices, governments. I moved to Dubai in the early 2000s to advise the Prime Minister of the United Arab Emirates on its Dubai Inc. strategy, etc. And he was right that you're going to be measured on your integrity and your judgment,
Mm.
right? And the judgment part comes through synthesizing all of this information and being able to distill all of this information to make decisions.
Yeah.
And even then, there's always some uncertainty.
Yeah, definitely. I went through this book recently called Think Again by Adam Grant, and he emphasized the importance in that book of the skill set of rethinking, the ability to rethink, and how much greater of a skill set it is, and not just how much greater, but also how much more rare it is to find somebody with the ability to rethink a position that they've maybe taken earlier. And I found that any time, like studying any sort of philosophy on your own, just picking up random books and going through different ideas, has really strengthened that piece for me a lot. Is just the ability to look at a previous judgment that you made or a previous stand that you took with new lenses and reconsider the old stance. Where do you land on that in terms of importance in the broader culture?
Well, yeah, I think, there are some people, thank you for that question, particularly in today's climate, right? Where the combination of being able to not only know your position, but understand and appreciate somebody else's position, that to me is what makes a person intelligent,
Hmm.
right? And it's kind of a version of this reconsideration point that Mr. Grant is making. Your ability to understand the perspective of others is a superpower,
Mm.
because whether you're trying to sell them something or whether you're trying to dissuade them of something, if you don't understand that position, then you are weakened in your ability to influence,
Mm.
right? And so that's not in some Machiavellian way. That's in a leadership way, that's in a management way. It is truly a skill set when you are able to both empathize by understanding the impact that something will have, when you are able to take on another viewpoint, etc., as you fashion your own, right? And so it is really such a powerful skill to have, because when you're in the business of trying to be an advisor or a hired for your good judgment, one of the central things that a person wants to know is, are you considering everything? How much bias are you bringing into it?
Yes.
How much is your own prejudice clouding your ability to assimilate what's out there,
Hmm.
right? And the more that you recognize, as smart as you are, you're not the market, and you're probably not smarter than the market,
Yeah.
the better you'll be able to truly think clearly and provide the kind of advice that others will want to pay you for.
Yeah.
Because there's opinion, which everybody has, and then there's really good judgment that is grounded on an assessment of risk and reward. And that is really challenging to do. I
Mm.
see it with traders, I see it with investors, I see it with entrepreneurs. Is, are you afraid because you don't know, but maybe somebody else does know? Are you uncertain because your self-doubt, or because it's actually unknowable? The ability to distinguish yourself from the and what's going on in your head from what is going out around you is truly a superpower, and it's a skill that you have to be thinking about for yourself,
Yeah.
right? As you then try to approach other problems.
So you have obviously furthered your knowledge and your skill set. You're extremely knowledgeable, extremely skilled. You also know a lot of people and are extremely well connected. So I'm curious, do you believe that who you know or what you know is more important in life, and why?
Right. Thank you for the question. You've set it up as a bit of a false choice. So let's unpack it, right?
Okay.
The name of your show is Travis Makes Money. So what is money? Money is a form of capital, right? Capital is a resource. So let's talk about capital and resources a little bit. There is financial capital, which is money. There is social capital, which is embedded in your question, which are the relationships that you have. Relational capital, which is the interaction you have with people that who you know bit. There is the emotional capital, which is you can know all the people in the world, but if you're a bully or if you are unstable, if you don't have the confidence, right? So you got financial capital, social capital, relational capital, emotional capital. You got these forms of capital, money of which is only one of them. And so whether you're an entrepreneur or a business person trying to solve a problem, all of those forms of capital are important. And I dare say that over the money and the financial capital, the others are even more important. Because if you've got good EQ, emotional wherewithal, emotional capital, you've built up trusted, long-term, consistent relationships, right? You are secure and you're ethical and you act with integrity. The money will come.
Mm.
And so often entrepreneurs think that they have a money problem. I'm like, I'm not so sure about that, right? Maybe you don't understand the problem,
Yeah.
right?
Fair.
Right. And so to boil that down to who you know, what you know, why would I choose? They're both important.
Fair answer. Fair response. Bob, I want to get into the coffee company now. You've founded this company now with the late Dikembe Mutombo. who's a professional basketball player, somebody that I very much enjoyed watching growing up. I was a big Shaq fan. Shaq's my favorite player. And so I always loved watching the battles, and now you have Matumbo Coffee, which is two things together in a phrase that I didn't expect to see. And then I got the pitch from your team about coming on the show. I was like, oh, that's super interesting that Dikembe Mutombo started a coffee company. So tell me a little bit about how that formation came about.
Yes. So first, Shaq has given us a shout out. We did NBA on TNT with Shaq and Charles Barkley. So they're rooting for the coffee company. They've had the coffee, and they've done some really cool things to support us because they're friends of Dikembe. I met Dikembe 35 plus years ago. He was a freshman at Georgetown, as
Oh,
was my
wow.
sister. And so he's a gangling teenager that's at Georgetown. Veronica, my little sister, was there, and I was pretending to come down to spend some time with her, but I was really coming to hang out with her and meet Alonzo Mourning and all those cool Georgetown giants who were kicking butt on the court.
Yeah.
And having gone to a little small school, and it was great to come into DC and look after her and see some of those guys. So that relationship has been around for quite a long time through my sister. Dikembe had created a foundation. His why was he was thinking of becoming a doctor. In fact, he had a scholarship, a State Department scholarship to go to Georgetown. He was not a basketball player when he went to Georgetown,
Interesting.
and but he's 7'2",
Yeah.
right? God blessed him with talent and hard work and determination, etc. And so he really became a fabulous basketball player while in college, which is obviously very unusual. But the great coach John Thompson and great competition and a great heart that he had, he became a top recruit in the league. But so I'd known him a very long time, and he went off and did his Hall of Fame thing. And what I admired most about what he did, of course, was the what he did off the court,
Mm.
right? Many kids, many young ballers, they want to get themselves a watch, and then they get a car, and then they get mama a house, right? That's kind of the trajectory in many cases, right? Set up moms, that's cool, of course. But Dikembe was trying to get his mother a hospital, right? Totally different kind of level of thinking,
Yeah,
right?
no kidding.
Because he comes from the Congo and he realized that how blessed he was, but he realized that the kids didn't have good schooling, they didn't have good health care. And unfortunately, his mother passed as a result of not having adequate health care in
Mm.
the Congo. So he likes to say, I didn't become a doctor, mom, but I built you a hospital. And he named it after her. So his why has been embedded in his DNA his entire life
Yeah.
about understanding how blessed he is. And the Marie Biambi Hospital is a testament to that. And so I had gone through my trajectory of being in finance and investing in sovereign wealth advisory, that sort of thing. And I was living in Dubai at the time. This was almost 5 years ago. And Dikembe sits on the Special Olympics Committee. I am working for the government of Dubai. We have dinner, and because Dubai was hosting the Special Olympics, and I'm thinking, do I want to do something with you on the philanthropy side? Well, it became pretty apparent we should do something with social enterprise because I can use my skill set. I'm a big believer in commerce over charity. I'm a big believer in teaching people how to fish, not giving them fish.
Yeah.
And and so it's like, Deke, you want to be Midas because there's gold in Africa. You want to be diamonds because there's diamonds in Africa. You want to be the oil guy. There's all the continent is so rich with so many things that we went through that, and it made sense to be coffee because the Congo grows great coffee
Mm.
that wasn't getting into the international trade community. And so we knew we had a world class product,
Mm.
and that we were going to have to build the infrastructure that can still have impact on the communities and villages in the Congo. And so be careful what you wish for. I said, because I was living and based in Dubai. I'll fly to Dubai because of my role with the government here. I got access to the ambassadors. I got access to the countries, etc. I will start sorting that out, and we'll build a trade route out of the Congo into the United States. Well, 6 months later, the world went topsy-turvy, COVID.
Mm.
So while I was working on the supply chain, he was going to be working on the demand side, NBA and corporate clients and all that stuff. But now nobody's drinking coffee in the office as no one's in the office. You can't even get the beans out of the continent into the United States because stuff is stuck. So you really got to be careful what you promise. But how do you build that in your business model? That had never happened.
Right.
That's 5 Sigma, 6 Sigma, you know, crazy stuff that's happening, right? Black
Yeah.
swan stuff, right?
I was going to say black swan and a half for sure.
No, exactly, right? Except if you look back, Gates said something about it. Others had said something about our vulnerability around whether it was COVID or not, the potential for a pandemic. So it wasn't a zero probability, actually, right? So
True.
it's easy to look back and connect dots and Monday night quarterback these sorts of things. But the point was that was one of our biggest learning tools
Mm.
because I realized we're not going to know what the shock is going to be, but it's going to be something. You've got to build in resiliency and redundancy for whatever might happen. And that got baked in our DNA because we were born out of a crisis. And that has really made us stronger, 4.5 years later, stronger, more viable, more sustainable, because very early on we were confronted with this crazy event that really affected our mindset. And it goes back to things that I learned in finance and investing. People think that entrepreneurs and venture capitalists are really about taking risk. No, it's really about the smart ones, the best ones. It's about risk mitigation. It's about risk reward.
Mm.
It's about risk adjusted returns. Other terms that let you know that there's always an obverse side to this coin. One
Yeah.
side is heads, the other side is tails. Make sure you understand both before you flip, right? What are the rules of the game and how do you, right? And so that we are a coffee business, but I've spent more than half of my time up until recently dealing with infrastructure, dealing with supply chains, dealing with logistics, dealing with fulfillment. Nothing sexy. And so when I can come on your show and say we're open for business, here's where you can get the coffee. I'm sure we'll get to that later
Yeah.
in the show, etc. It's because we had to do the hard work first.
Yeah, and for an amazing cause with a great product, great brand behind it. Yeah, if you're listening right now, you can go to mutombocoffee.com. That's UTOMBO, mutombocoffee.com. And they were kind enough to set up a discount code for everybody here. So Travis25, use Travis25 at checkout at mutombocoffee.com to get a good discount on your first order of coffee there. Bob, there's too many questions I have for you and too little time to ask them. But before we jump off here, what are your thoughts right now on the economy at large and what young people can do to go make more money? This is the first time, unprecedented time in history, where 30-year-olds are worse off than their parents were at their age economically. Can you speak to what young people should be doing right now?
Yeah, I think we sort of touched upon it. Don't get sucked up in buying the latest thing. It's not an asset. It may boost your ego, but it's not an asset. So really be careful about that. Now, there are some that will, in your description of your show, you talked about coffee, right? And how it was Mr. Wonderful, and I think others talked about, don't waste your money on coffee spending. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of a counter to that, right? And this is in our world and what we think of coffee. If it's just a commodity and it's $5 to go to such and such store to get a commoditized coffee, whereas for 20% of that you can make a good cup at your home, you should certainly do that, right? Makes sense. But for us, coffee is a catalyst for community and conversation and collaboration and creativity. It's it's the coffee houses historically were places you would go. They used to be called penny universities, by the way, right? And you would, for a penny, you get a cup of coffee, and people would sit around, not with the mic over a laptop, but face to face, talk about the issues of the day. Artists and musicians and people would go to these coffee houses in Europe and other places and talk about politics.
Mm.
Lots of insurrections were brewed, pun intended, in some of these coffee houses, but a lot of creativity came out of it. So, yes, if you're just viewing coffee as a commodity, put that work in something that's truly has an opportunity to grow. But if you view coffee as a way to communicate or connect for Sunday brunch with your family, or for a colleague, take a colleague out and say, hey, let's talk about this project. Coffee's on me. Or if you truly need it as a productivity hack to get you through, that 10 p.m. deadline, right? Those that's well spent, because then the coffee is not a commodity anymore. You're using it as a tool to enhance an objective, not just for silly sort of commodity consumption. So, and I think you have to always sort of weigh that, as we talked at the top of the call. I'm not going to be foolish and buy a whole bunch of fancy suits and ties, but there is an occasion in which you need to dress the part. So yes, but do what is necessary, no more than that. And the issue really is just be thoughtful. Be mindful in conversations that you're having, be thoughtful in your spending, recognize the power of compounding. It's a penny a day. Everyone knows that test, right? If I were to double a penny every day, how many years would it be, or days would it be, in fact, to become a millionaire, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That compounding is real. And that compounding happens in how your mindset is and how you make assessments about things. That compounding is with regards to how you spend your time, right? You can make more money, but the money that you make definitely has a correlation of how you spend your time. So spend your time as well as your money wisely as well,
Mm.
right? And so these are kind of common sense things, but with regards to tying this and back to sort of our mission, when we talk to corporations, we tell them if this is a procurement decision, then go ahead and buy whatever's at the buy one, get one store but this is about culture. This is about making sure that your employees feel that they're wanted and there's well-being, and that you want them around talking about the new idea, not
Mm.
complaining about the bitterness in their coffee. That's what we stand for. So to the young people out there, yes, be mindful of how you spend your time, be mindful of what's an asset, be mindful of that these purchases that you're doing are they really contributing to your long-term growth? And if they are, because then that coffee with a mentor or with somebody cool where you're really bonding and learning could be well spent, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, don't get hung up on the coffees. Don't get hung up on, insert expense here. Uh, just decide what's important to you, and don't and be mindful about it. You can't just go around throwing money all over the place, pretending like you're a multimillionaire when you're not. So decide what's important to you. And I second that. A cup of coffee can be a great way to spark a conversation and connect with somebody, which is arguably more important for your health than anything else. So matumbocoffee.com, use code Travis25. Bob, thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate you. Everybody else listening, tuning in, remember, money will only solve your money problems, but it's a little bit easier to solve the rest of your problems if you got some money in the bank. So let's solve that problem first here on the Travis Makes Money podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time. Peace out.